Welcome to our new series where we will be looking at one of my favorite video game series ever, Resident Evil. In this series, we will explore the Resident Evil lore by looking at each game's story in detail. In this first installment, however, we will be looking at the Resident Evil lore before the events of the video games. Perfect for anyone who wants to understand the lore before diving into the games. So let's get started. Just like human history, our story begins in Africa. See, hundreds or possibly thousands of years ago, a Western Africa society named the Ndipaya discovered a cavern on the edge of a marshland. Inside, they found a flower with unique properties. Although this type of flower grew elsewhere and was relatively harmless, the flower that grew in the cavern was toxic for reasons unknown to the Ndipaya. Everyone who consumed it would perish. Except for one, a tribesman who not only survived, but gained superhuman abilities and became a god king after consuming the flower. Ndipaya lore suggests this mutant king lived and ruled for centuries. What's mind-blowing is that more than one person ate and died eating the flower. If I saw someone die from eating something, I would give it a hard pass. The Ndipaya were freaks of nature, I guess. Anyways. The flower became a centerpiece in Ndipaya society, and any tribesman who wished to become the next king would have to successfully consume the flower in order to gain the throne. The Ndipaya would build an ancient stone garden to house these mysterious plants. The flower, as well as the stairs that led to the garden, became known as the Stairway of the Sun.
This place.
How can they survive underground?
These are no ordinary flowers.
What the Ndipaya did not know was the effect of the Stairway of the Sunflower was the result of a virus in its genome. Although the genetic information was normally inactive junk DNA, for unexplained reasons, the unique environmental conditions of the cavern caused the active production of the virus. Exposure to the active virus was almost always fatal in humans. But due to genetic defects, some would survive and gain superhuman abilities. In the Resident Evil world, we know this virus as the progenitor virus. This virus would serve as a starting point for other viruses in Resident Evil, including the T and G viruses. Let's now fast forward to the 1960s, when flower power was strong, and three men wanted a different kind of flower power. They wanted to harness the Stairway of the Sunflower, so they founded a corporation called Umbrella Pharmaceuticals, the name of which came about after one of the founders saw this cool mural. And who were these three rich, ambitious men? None other than Dr. Oswell E. Spencer, Dr. James Marcus, and Dr. Edward Ashford. Or as I like to call them, the three old men of the apocalypse, because they were just the worst. So let's talk about each of them. Spencer was born in the prestigious Spencer family, which had been among the most elite European families for many generations. And fun fact, the Spencer family crest looks a lot like the logo of the Umbrella Corporation. Needless to say, Spencer's family was ridiculously wealthy. I mean, he grew up in a freaking castle on a cliff overlooking the British coastline, and he took on hobbies like art collecting and hunting rare animals. Young Spencer was a brilliant student and was given a wide-ranging education. He became well-versed in classic literature, early modern humanist treatises, and of course, mid-20th century eugenics theories. It was around this time that he learned about the Stairway of the Sunflower through one of his favorite books, The Natural History Conspectus, a rare late Victorian encyclopedia that chronicled a 34-year trek through Africa by British explorer Henry Travis. The following entry explains,
Henry compiled the records of his expeditions into an impressive 72-volume set entitled Survey of Natural History. These books covered everything from animals, plants, insects, minerals, and topography, to the native inhabitants and their cultures, histories, and traditions. These books also contained extensive records detailing the folklore of various peoples throughout the continent. These tomes were a veritable encyclopedia of the African continent. The Travis family, however, were not the only ones privy to the knowledge of Henry's journal. Umbrella's founder, Oswell E. Spencer, was interested in them for the folklore recorded therein. Of particular interest were the account of the Ndipaya rituals. Spencer hypothesized that the flowers used in their rituals held significance, and this ultimately led to the discovery of the progenitor virus.
During Spencer's teenage years, his obsession with eugenics and disregard of human life in the name of science would likely have taken hold. See, Europe at this time had plunged into the Second World War, and a little man with a funny mustache would have likely served as inspiration for Spencer's obsession with creating the perfect human, no matter how many people would have to perish.
The new superior breed of humans, given birth by the progenitor virus.
A few years later, during the 1950s, Spencer was a university student training to be a physician. It was while at university that he became close friends with Edward Ashford and James Marcus, the other two founders of the Umbrella Corporation that we will discuss soon. And as a young, brash student, Spencer decided to take a solo hike trip in Eastern Europe. And if watching Mr. Ballin has taught us anything, it is that when you go hiking solo, you are bound to run into some weird stuff. And weird stuff did Spencer find. He became lost due to his inexperience in the unfamiliar terrain, and he soon collapsed on a snow-covered road. This would have likely been the end of Spencer, and he must have known this. Luckily for him and unlucky for the rest of the world, however, he was rescued by a woman named Miranda, a priestess and biologist of an isolated mountain village which worshipped the so-called Black God. Miranda was a woman who had been born in the mountain village. In 1909, she gave birth to a daughter who she loved dearly. In 1919, the Spanish flu made its way to her village, and tragically, her daughter was amongst the casualties. Driven mad with despair, Miranda ventured into a nearby cave where she intended to unlife herself. However, she came across a massive ancient fungal super colony, which she named the Mold, presumably because it looked moldy. Miranda reached out and touched the mass of fungus and immediately saw the memories of hundreds and possibly thousands of people who had been consumed by the fungus over the centuries. Among them was Miranda's daughter, whose body has been consumed by the fungus after her burial. Miranda became obsessed with the idea that she could use the mold to bring her lost daughter back to life, and she began to worship this substance as the Black God.
My beautiful daughter, come to me.
She made a new religion out of this, curing villagers of their sickness by infecting them with the mold, and using the apparent miracles to proclaim herself as a prophet of the Black God. The villagers, under the mind-altering effects of the mold, abandoned their faith and converted to Miranda's new cult, thereafter addressing Miranda as Mother.
Silence! My decision is final. There will be no argument. Remember from whence you came.
So this is what Spencer walked into when he was rescued by Miranda as a young university student. And Miranda took a liking to Spencer and took him in as her protege. Apparently unfazed by all the mold worshipping, Spencer would go on to befriend Miranda. And he would learn about the mold and its ability to mutate life forms. This deeply inspired him as a means to create the perfect human, as he had never thought of mutating a human by implanting them with an organism. Spencer knew he had to leave Miranda. Although he enjoyed his time with her and the vast knowledge he gained from her, the two held very different worldviews. While Miranda was obsessed with reviving her daughter, Spencer wanted to reshape humanity. Spencer therefore decided to leave the village, but would keep in touch with Miranda by writing letters to her. After finding the stairway to the sunflower and deciding to create the Umbrella Corporation, for example, Spencer would send Miranda the following letter.
Dear Miranda, my deepest apologies for not meeting you in person. I would love nothing more than to visit your quaint village once more. However, I am incredibly busy. Then again, I suppose for an immortal woman such as yourself, you no longer remember this poor, half-dead medical student in the snow. I have always cherished the revelations I came to 15 years ago when I stayed in your village. I was inspired by your research. To think one could transform a human by infecting them with an organism, positively visionary. I knew that with the knowledge I could achieve my own vision for the next step in human evolution. Even after 2 world wars and humanity on the cusp of another, my conviction never wavered. I realized, however, through the nights of intellectual talks you and I shared, that your conviction differed from mine. You hoped to bring back a single dead person, while I aimed to change the world. The experiments on the mold would not have aided me in my endeavor to achieve exponential infection. I thought a virus would be more effective. This is why, my dear, I had to leave you. I still regret never telling you goodbye. My apologies for reminiscing. I actually have news that I thought might please you. I have found the key to evolution, the progenitor of virus found in Africa. I plan to start a company with friends and colleagues dedicated to the virus's research. I will call it Umbrella, just like the symbol in the cave that we spoke about. I am one step closer to making my vision a reality. I hope you will be able to achieve your goal someday too. You taught me so much, and for that I will be forever in your debt. Sincerely, your lifelong student, Oswell E. Spencer.
After leaving Miranda and her village, Spencer returned to university a changed man. Spencer became obsessed with replicating Miranda's achievements in his own way, as he did not believe the mold alone would be enough to create his vision of a new humanity. It was also at this time that the Cold War began to intensify, and Spencer became convinced that humanity was doomed to fall. In his view, humanity could only be saved by evolving mankind and attaining a superior moral code, which is pretty ironic for a guy with absolutely zero moral compass. Though he did not know for sure how he could accomplish this, Spencer believed a virus could be used to reach his vision. And so, Spencer combined forces with Marcus and Ashford and created Umbrella. Almost nothing is known about Marcus's early life. The only thing that is known is that he graduated from university in 1939, which is where he became good friends with Spencer and Ashford. Around 20 years after graduating, during the 1960s, Marcus worked in the laboratory of a Swiss university, studying poliovirology, which is the study of viruses that existed in the past but are now extinct. It was during this time that Marcus, like Spencer, became fascinated by Henry Travis's Natural History Conspectus, which detailed the Ndipaya's people's flower-eating ritual that supposedly awarded any would-be survivor with superhuman abilities as noted before. Marcus hypothesized that if the tales were to be believed, a mutagenic virus was reasonable. Marcus left in search of the flower in West Africa, accompanied by Spencer and one of his students. After some time, Marcus and the group successfully tracked down the entrance to the secret Ndipaya kingdom. They traversed a series of caverns until they finally arrived at the Garden of the Sun, where the stairway of the sunflower grew. They would spend 3 months analyzing the flower while being subjected to attacks from tribesmen. One could only hope the tribesmen tried a little harder to stop them. Oh well. After a series of experiments, the group successfully isolated the virus housed within the genome of the flower, which they named the progenitor virus on the 3rd of December 1966. They left for Europe the following day with samples of the virus and seeds so they could cultivate the flowers at their lab. A diary entry from Marcus's student describes their journey.
December 4th. Mr. Spencer once spoke of a flower called the Stairway to the Sun. Supposedly, this flower would give the person who consumed it incredible abilities. Everyone thought it was nothing more than a rumor or legend that Mr. Spencer was telling us, but later research would prove us wrong. The first person to recognize the validity of that story was my teacher, Dr. James Marcus. He hypothesized that a virus, hereto unknown, might exist that could alter DNA. The man was so perspicacious. His hypothesis turned out to be correct. The virus discovered in that flower was labeled the progenitor. For 3 months in Africa, we worked diligently, read over results, staved off attacks from the Ndipaya. After such time, our efforts were finally rewarded. Even Dr. Marcus, who until yesterday looked exhausted, was in good spirits. He wants to return home as soon as possible to delve deeper into his research. I feel the same way. I want to learn the secrets of this progenitor virus as soon as possible.
The seeds they brought with them successfully bloomed into flowers, but to Marcus's dismay, the flowers did not produce the virus in capacity. He surmised that the Garden of the Sun must have provided unique environmental conditions that allowed the flowers to actively produce the virus. Despite this setback, Spencer was determined to set up Umbrella and continue the research on the progenitor virus. Another diary entry from Marcus's student describes the issues plaguing the team.
February 12th. We've hit the metaphorical brick wall. We brought the progenitor flower back from Africa and attempted to cultivate it here. The initial culture samples of the progenitor virus has not shown DNA-altering characteristics. We cultivated the flower to mass produce the progenitor virus. First, everything proceeded smoothly. The plants were strong and grew quickly. In a short amount of time, they flowered. Here is when a major problem surfaced. The flowers did not contain the progenitor virus. Perhaps the environment in which they're grown triggers the development of the virus. This must be investigated further. March 23rd. We've made no progress. We've tried cultivating the flower under different conditions, but with no luck in triggering development of the virus itself. Thus far, we have tried changing the soil, water, temperature, and light exposure, all with no success. I got into a heated debate with Dr. Marcus about the direction this research was taking. During that debate, Mr. Spencer interjected some foolhardy notion of starting a company. Without the progenitor virus, there's no point in starting a company. Does he not see that? It's all pointless.
And to add to Marcus's woes, it was around this time that Marcus was linked to a scandal within his university, according to which his research results were being forged. Marcus was therefore kicked out of the university research team, and his state funding was cut. In 1967, Marcus finally left the university after accepting an offer from Spencer to use his Spencer Foundation instead. Marcus would have to perform all research at the Spencer estate and could not disclose his findings to anyone outside of the team. So, Marcus set up a series of experiments in an attempt to harness the power of the progenitor virus. He began his research on bacteria, and Marcus had a breakthrough when he successfully exposed a dead E. coli cell to the progenitor virus, after which the cell revived, mutated, and reproduced. The feat of using a virus to repair cellular protein should have been impossible according to contemporary science, but Marcus had done it. Immediately after this discovery, Spencer set up Umbrella Pharmaceuticals in March 1967 as another means of funding the project. But the team faced another hurdle. They were running out of progenitor cultures, so they devised a plan to obtain more from the Ndipaya kingdom. The team decided to hire a team of mercenaries to drive out the Ndipaya warriors. I mean, why share when you can just take, right? After 4 months, the mercenary had captured and were defending the Garden of the Sun, allowing the team to come and extract progenitor cultures for further study. Marcus had originally planned to go to Africa with his student. On Spencer's insistence, however, Marcus's student would have to go alone, as Marcus would have to instead become chair of the newly opened Umbrella Executive Training School, which included a custom-built laboratory for the research. While Marcus had no interest in returning to a university-type environment and simply wanted to research progenitor, he understood that it was the best thing to do as there would not be an appropriate lab in the Ndipaya ruins. So, Marcus's students ventured without his teacher. Marcus's students recalls the trip as follows.
April 15th. It has been over a year since we've had any breakthroughs. That's why Dr. Marcus and I have decided to return to Africa. We can no longer continue our research without the progenitor virus. I know those routine attacks by the Ndipaya are really going to wreck my nerves, but for the sake of our research, I will persevere. In the face of my foreseen dismay, it was Mr. Spencer who provided the answer. If you're worried about the Ndipaya, then we'll just have to remove them from the equation. I can only imagine the look of shock on our faces. The idea never occurred to us. It was quite an atypical solution to our problem, but it seemed to be the only option available. Dr. Marcus and I decided to try Mr. Spencer's plan. August 19th. Finally, some good news. We learned they were able to chase the Ndipaya off their land. The land we acquired only amounts half of those underground ruins. But if it includes the area where the progenitor flower grows, then there should be no issues. Mr. Spencer said he plans to construct research facilities at the site, which will expedite our research into the virus. We hastily made our preparations to depart for Africa, but Mr. Spencer requested that Mr. Marcus stay in Raccoon City to take over the training center. We were initially taken aback by this request, but we soon realized it was the logical course of action. Dr. Marcus needs a calm environment to properly conduct his research. If he were in Africa, there would be no proper facility for him to use at this time. I just hope the African research facilities get built soon. So now I will go alone to Africa and send back samples of the progenitor virus to Dr. Marcus. Both Dr. Marcus and Mr. Spencer agree this is the best course of action. I have to start making preparations to go. I have a feeling I'll be pretty busy starting tomorrow, September 29th. I've been in Africa for 2 weeks now. It's a good thing Dr. Marcus isn't here. This place is far from being a paradise of research and scientific study. The so-called research facilities are nothing more than a bunch of tents, and we have to employ armed soldiers to keep the Ndipaya at bay. But the thing that gets on my nerves the most is the sound of the construction for the real research facilities. How am I supposed to concentrate on research when everything is threatening to drive me insane? I'm trying to just concentrate on extracting virus samples from the progenitor flower so I can send them to Dr. Marcus. Hopefully, if I can focus on my work, I can remain sane in this godforsaken place.
Despite his crankiness about construction sounds, Marcus's student was able to provide a steady supply of progenitor cultures to Umbrella. And so Marcus was able to resume his research. Let's now talk about the third co-founder of Umbrella, Dr. Edward Ashford. Like Spencer and Marcus, Ashford was obsessed with eugenics and the idea of creating the perfect human. And also like Spencer and Marcus, Ashford came from a prestigious European family. In fact, the Ashford family was established as one of the world's few noble dynasties by its beautiful and very well-educated matriarch, Veronica Ashford. If that name sounds familiar, it is because it will play a big role in the Resident Evil timeline. It was said that Veronica Ashford was a child prodigy, and at a very young age had demonstrated extraordinary aptitude in every subject. She was especially well-versed in mathematics, biology, and linguistics. By the age of 10, she already had a postgraduate education and was fluent in 10 languages. It was said that with her good looks and captivating manner of speaking, she would charm everyone she came into contact with. As a result, she easily won over faithful servants. During her lifetime, she would obtain the title of Countess Ashford, which would be succeeded by her descendants. So for generations, the wealth and power of the Ashford family had been passed down from descendant to descendant. But the family had been in a steady decline in prestige and power in recent years, and Edward Ashford sought to restore his family's name. And what better way to restore your family's honor than creating mutated humans through super unethical means? At least that's what Ashford thought. And so when Spencer suggested creating the Umbrella Corporation as means to fund the progenitor research, Ashford was on board. But in competition to see who could achieve results the fastest, Spencer, Marcus, and Ashford founded their own laboratories and went their separate ways in a project named T-Virus. This, as we'll see, would lead to a major fallout between the three co-founders. By the late 1960s, Spencer was conducting his research at a facility called the Arklay Laboratory inside his private mansion near Raccoon City. Marcus was conducting his research at the Umbrella Executive Training School, also near Raccoon City. And Ashford worked alongside his son Alexander at a newly finished laboratory constructed out of an abandoned mine in Antarctica. I am sure the penguins were just absolutely thrilled to have a mutagenic virus research facility right next door. It was at that time that Spencer became increasingly paranoid that his friend Marcus and Ashford would somehow ruin his vision of humanity. See, Spencer's ambition had grown to more than just create the perfect human. Spencer wanted to create a new world order, and he wanted to be a god.
I was to become a god. Creating a new world with an advanced race of human beings.
And soon, paranoia turned into evil schemes to take out Marcus and Ashford to steal their research for Spencer's benefit. So, in July 1968, Spencer devised a plan whereby Ashford would become infected by his own primitive T virus in a staged accident. Though we do not know what Spencer's plan was exactly, we do know that it resulted in taking out Ashford permanently. Ashford would be succeeded by his son Alexander. But because Alexander was a geneticist, not a virologist, he was unable to continue his father's work. This left Marcus as Spencer's main and only competitor. For the following 10 years, Spencer and Marcus would continue their research, and their methods would become darker and more twisted. Marcus, for example, first began by working on leech DNA, which resulted in the creation of a progenitor strain that was useful in weapons research. In the months after, he moved on to animal experimentation, with subjects ranging from amphibians to reptiles to mammals. His test subjects included scorpions, bats, and monkeys. But this was not enough, and he soon became interested in human experimentation. In the ruthless quest for results, Marcus turned his eyes on children as a potential source of research. Marcus therefore began to infect his students at the Umbrella Executive Training School by having them tricked into touching his leech specimens while working at the laboratory. And bloody sheets in the dorm rooms would suggest some were left in their beds to mutate. On one floor of the training school, Marcus would restrain infected students to the walls with chains, force them to sit on iron chairs, be placed under water using dunking cranes, and subjected to an iron maiden. In one part of the facility, children were forced into chambers where non-fun fumes would be distributed to study their survival abilities. And you know that thing you did to frogs in science class? Yeah, Marcus would do that, but to children. It was said that so many were experimented on, in fact, that even more than 20 years later, there would be remains laying around, and many were found in animal cages.
Attention. This is Dr. Marcus. Please be silent as we reflect upon our company motto. Obedience breeds discipline. Discipline breeds unity. Unity breeds power. Power is life.
So yeah, Marcus's darkness knew no bounds. But karma would eventually catch up to him. And before you think Spencer was any better, he was not. Many of the students Marcus experimented on would be sent to Spencer's Arklay laboratory and other facilities. So, he fully endorsed Marcus's dark methods. And there's also the story of the architect Spencer hired to build his mansion / Arklay laboratory, George Trevor. Spencer contracted George in 1962 to build a private mansion in the Arklay Mountains and deep within Raccoon Forest. Spencer lured him with the promise of unlimited funding so he could give free rein to his imagination. George constructed a manor that would be, at the same time, beautiful and mysterious. Upon completion of the mansion, however, Spencer came to the shocking realization that George knew all of the mansion's secrets, including the existence of the underground laboratory, and panicked. It's hard to believe that for such a smart guy, Spencer hadn't considered that the guy who planned every square foot of his mansion would know every square foot of his mansion. Regardless, Spencer quickly made plans to dispose of George, so that only he and his closest allies would know of the lab's existence. So he took a simple and straightforward approach, luring George and his family, kidnapping them, and subjecting them to highly unethical experimentation. So, in November 1967, Spencer invited the entire Trevor family, which included George, his wife, and his 14-year-old daughter, to the newly built mansion to celebrate its completion. Due to a busy work schedule, however, George could not attend, but told his wife and daughter that he would join them later. As soon as the two arrived on November 10th, they were dragged away by Spencer's henchmen and were taken into underground caverns as human research subjects for the progenitor virus. George's wife perished soon after infection, but his daughter survived with mutations. As George arrived at the mansion, he was captured just the same, but escaped from his room. And ironically, he eventually fell victim to one of his own traps and perished. George's daughter was kept as a test subject for some 30 years. So yeah, Spencer is seriously the worst. At this point in the story, we have to talk about two of Marcus's proteges, Albert Wesker and William Birkin. They would be Marcus's downfall, leading to the events of the first Resident Evil game. Albert Wesker was a child protege that was taken from his parents at a young age by Spencer's agents. He, along with other children, were forced to participate in mutagenic projects called Project W, and all of the children were named Wesker as the project leader. The point of this project was to create a group of gifted children who would herald a new generation of humans. This project was so significant and classified, in fact, that it was not even part of the Umbrella Corporation's archives. So the children were brainwashed to share Spencer's values and were forced to believe humans were an evolutionary dead end in need of order, deliverance, and rebirth. The Wesker children were given the finest education money could buy. Albert Wesker, for example, made his way to university at a young age and graduated with a doctorate in virology at the age of 17. When the children grew up, they were allowed to go into the world under monitoring to take up jobs in a number of professions. Many, including Albert, were drawn to join Umbrella. Surprise, surprise. William Birkin, like Albert Wesker, was a child prodigy who earned his doctorate as a teenager. Birkin's early life was much more normal than Wesker's, however, not having participated in any shady secret project. He was asked to join Umbrella at the age of 15. The Spencer Foundation would regularly send prodigies to Marcus in order to assist him with his research, but Marcus typically ignored them, deeming them to be useless to Umbrella's plans due to personality traits he did not like. But there were two rare exceptions in the 1977-78 class, Wesker and Birkin, who had been headhunted due to their excellent university academic achievements. It was said that the two developed a friendly rivalry while at training school, and most important to Marcus, they had a relentless dedication to research, which quickly earned his respect. Following a series of company scandals that were covered up, Marcus's Umbrella Executive Training School was closed in July 1978. Both Wesker and Birkin were immediately offered jobs and were transferred to Spencer's Arkley laboratory as senior researchers. Secretly, however, they received these positions as a reward for stealing a sample of Marcus's completed T-virus strain, which furthered Spencer's research. Marcus remained in his laboratory to continue experimenting, but he grew suspicious that Spencer was trying to steal his data, so he planned to present his results to Umbrella's executive directors, believing this would win him the necessary support to take control of the company. However, Spencer figured out Marcus's plan and devised a plan to eliminate his last and only threat. So, Spencer ordered Marcus's old students, Wesker and Birkin, to take out Marcus with the help of an armed squad. As he lay on the floor, Birkin and Wesker took Marcus's data and would go on to credit for his findings.
10 years ago, Spencer had me assassinated.
Time to die, Doctor.
I will take over your research.
Wesker. Birkin.
You almost want to feel bad for Marcus, but let's be honest, he had it coming. But this would not be the end for Marcus. This concludes the history we need to cover before diving into the Resident Evil games. We hope you have enjoyed and let us know what things you learned about Resident Evil lore, or if there are any other details you think are worth knowing before playing the games. Join us in our next video, where we will begin explaining the story and lore of each of the Resident Evil games. Until next time!